Well, our first guest is joining us in studio, Mr. Scott Kettle. Scott is the CEO of a company called GAWK Incorporated. They're one of these rare companies. The name of the company is also their ticker symbol, GAWK. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Don. Pleasure to see you again.
Now, we've been keeping track of your company for a few years. We haven't had you on the show in quite some time. We're reinitiating coverage of the company. Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been an interesting few years for us.
Well, tell us what the company does.
GAWK is a cloud communications provider. We provide edge data center and voice services to small and medium-sized businesses, both here locally and abroad.
Well, what's interesting about cloud computing is there are those people who still think there's a cloud somewhere in the sky and this is all interacting, but why don't you tell us exactly what cloud computing is?
Well, you know, to make it very simple, the cloud is really just a metaphor or the newest term for what the internet is.
Right.
It's a very simplistic technology in a lot of respects.
Well, I know that a really good example that people have used to describe the science or the implementation of cloud computing, they use Facebook. Because Facebook is not actually software that's installed on your computer. It's at their headquarters, but you're able to use it from any location, from your mobile, from your tablet, from a computer. And that's a fairly good example of what cloud computing is all about, right?
Oh, absolutely. Facebook is a company that is using cloud services all day long.
Now, I saw a couple of very interesting press releases here in the last couple of weeks. Things seem to be going very well. Why don't you tell us?
Yeah, you know, we've been adding some new customers, growing our business. Revenues have been growing phenomenally well. You know, we are now averaging about a little over $500,000 a month, which is phenomenal growth. To break that down for you, and let's put it into our terminology, we are, from our voice services division, are currently reaching about 100 million people a week. We're processing 100 million calls on a weekly basis.
Now, why do customers come to you? Let's talk about that. What is it about the company that they need from you that they say, you know, Scott, we need to hire your company, do this for us. What is it you're providing them?
Well, we provide them with voice services, hosted PBX, you know, and some contact center and unified communications. But really, you know, from the investment side of things, to break this down for you, let me clear out some of the technical buzzwords and keywords and all of that gobbledygook.
Okay.
You know, if you want to look at GAWK from the investment side of things, it's a very simple business model. We're almost like a bank. And what I mean by that is our business model is very simple. We buy from a plethora of vendors at a deeply discounted rate. Now, for that deep discount, we have to pay we have very short credit terms. So we get weekly credit terms. So whatever I used last week, I pay for this week. Now, from there, when we sell to the larger companies out there that will pay a premium for the luxury of having longer credit terms, we provide them with 30 and 30, which means whatever they use this month, they don't pay until the end of next month. And GAWK fills that gap between the tier 1 providers, the large providers, and the tier 3 providers. We are the bridge, or a tier 2, which goes between the smaller guys that need that weekly cash flow and the larger companies that can't really keep up with paying hundreds, thousands of vendors on a weekly basis.
Well, it's interesting because I just was talking about that in the monologue where a lot of small businesses in the country now have less than 2 weeks of cash reserves. Fully half of the companies in the United States have less than a month's cash reserves. So working with a company like yours, where you're able to stretch the credit term, so to speak, because you're basically taking on that burden, that's really helpful.
Oh my God, it's extremely helpful. You know, for the larger providers out there, the Vonages of the world, the Fairpoints of the world, you know, all the household name companies out there. If they were to take on this task of dealing with hundreds, thousands of vendors and then paying them on a weekly basis, the amount of data you're looking at processing, right now, for example, as I had mentioned earlier, we're dealing with doing 100 million calls per week, which means we're reaching 100 million people a week. The amount of data that I have on a daily basis that I have to crunch is about 50 gigs of data.
Wow.
And I'm going to use a highly technical term here. That is a metric ton of data You know, I mean, it's crazy how much data that we have to process on just a daily basis. To try and do that at the size of a Vonage or a Fairpoint or an AT&T, which they do process their data, but to analyze it, make sure that it all matches up, the bills are correct, and et cetera, is, you know, just something that is so much easier by using a company such as GAWK, where by adding GAWK into their network, they have one vendor, and GAWK deals with hundreds of vendors.
It's a fascinating story. One quick question. I mean, how much pressure is it on a company like GAWK where you're basically paying on 7-day credit terms but offering 30-day credit terms to your clients?
You know, that's a great question, and you know, while I wouldn't say that there's pressure there, because we do a couple of things here. First off, when we take on a larger client, we get what's called revenue insurance.
Okay.
And from that, so we're secure. The revenue insurance will cover 90%. Fortunately, our margins on these types of transactions are about 25%. So even if somebody didn't pay us, we still make money, you know, through the revenue insurance. Now, typically that has never happened, so we don't have to worry about that. But what it really leads to is, what is GAWK's limiting factor to growth? And it's a very simple solution: cash. You know, if we bring on a customer that's doing $1 million a month in revenue for us, we need to be able to carry 7 weeks before we see their incoming cash to us, which means with the discount, or, you know, with our margins, we need to have about $1.25 million in cash on hand to grow by $1 million a month in revenue. Very simple, very easy model.
Fascinating. Once again, the company is GAWK Incorporated, G-A-W-K. Make sure you visit their website at gawkinc.com. Scott, looking forward to more interviews from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Don. It's a pleasure.